All right, let's bring you more reaction on this tariff story, but also looking at the National Treasury tabling its budget vote in Parliament earlier today. And in part, Finance Minister Godongwana saying that there's a review of the conditional grants. The debt issues are also being dealt with, and the way government is spending is also another issue of focus. But there's been mixed reaction from some of the MPs there. We're speaking now to Wits University political economist, Dr. Lumkile Mondi. Dr. Mondi, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. So, what do you make of this decision by the US, firstly?
Well, we're not surprised. We are expecting that, under this administration, our relationship with the US is going to be very, very different. It's going to be volatile. It's going to be unpredictable. Therefore, we need to live with the realities of the day and try and see how we can keep them at the table, keep on bargaining. Of course, it doesn't seem as though with this administration, any data and any evidence could be convincing. Since it is a political ploy by this administration to gain political concessions, which at this juncture we don't know what they're about. Initially, we knew that we were accused of killing white people as South Africa, and we've shown that that's not the case. So he has to show us what the political agenda he has, but at least we'll continue bargaining. The American goods landing here, about 77% of them land here without duties at all. And therefore, America being the third trading partner for us, will continue exploiting other avenues whilst losing market share in the US, given that countries like Chile and others will compete much better than us in the domestic American market due to the tariffs that have imposed to us. So it's going to be tough days for our industry, tough days for the country, but this is what it is. This is how the relationship has been changed in the Trump geoeconomics.
So how then does South Africa begin to deal with this? I know that you say that we need to try and navigate this, but one wonders if we're in a strong position to be able to do this, given the fact that you do have a US president who says that if South Africa retaliates, then there will be consequences.
I don't think retaliation is an option for us. I think we know that Europe, at least on manufactured goods, is still a good market for us. And we must continue to look at Europe and see how much gains can we continue in other products in Europe through our SADC European Union agreement. We look at continuing engaging with China and bringing manufactured goods into China, because the bulk of our exports to China are raw commodities, particularly iron ore and other minerals. So therefore, in this case, really, I don't think this administration can do much. It's to sit at the table, negotiate, but at the same time, continuing to trade with them, even though we're not going to be competitive in that market. There's nothing more we could do beyond that. Of course, if this become a permanent relationship with the US when this admin term ends, then we'll have to develop other strategies. But I think at the moment, this is this administration agenda. They've decided this is how they're going to deal with the world, because not only us, and in that period, we have to really know that there'll be these contradictions in this administration, and therefore we'll have to walk this tightrope in making sure that as they continue attacking us through tariffs, we diversify our trade, but at the same time we look at ways of supporting our companies of the shock that's being imposed by the American government.
So when you then look at the developments in Parliament earlier on, when the National Treasury was delivering its budget vote, and the Finance Minister speaking about a myriad of issues and reviews that he says that are now going to come into effect. But you then have a reaction from different MPs, for example, the EFF saying that it rejects this budget vote. It's calling it an austerity budget, anti-poor, and a tool for, and I quote, preserving elite interests at the expense of the poor. Is it?
Not at all. I think there's a complete misunderstanding of the depth of the crisis that economically South Africa faces. Remember that our infrastructure has been dissipated under the different administration through the state capture and through mismanagement and incompetence that we've seen in the past 8 years. and our capacity as a country, which was at some time, some years ago, about 3.5%, has reduced tremendously to about, at least the best, to about 2%. Therefore, in an economy such as ours that's facing these challenges, state capture, COVID, and now the geoeconomics that's led by President Trump, our economy is under a lot of stress. Therefore, low growth rate requires huge reforms. And we've seen that through Operation Lumkile, led by the presidency, we are seeing massive improvement. We know that with the transport sector, we've introduced huge reforms. The recent sector reforms are paying off. ESCOM is almost stable. We've got a water crisis that's sitting at us. So there's so much that needs to be done. So I think many parliamentarians and many South Africans underestimate the depth of the crisis. We see it with the youth unemployment. We see it with company closures as the challenges continue to face us. So we're in a deep economic crisis, and we need our government to get as much support as it can from business, but also from us as citizens, to get the constitutional order back again, and more important also, to support all the initiatives that government and business are doing to make sure that at least our economy is in a better position in 5 years to improve our capacity and then create those jobs. So those that talk about austerity, they may shout from that pavilion. The reality is that South Africa is in a deep crisis. That's why those the support in this budget by the Treasury is so important of the South African Revenue Services to try and see through the innovation that Kisut and his team are introducing. We can recover more revenue to support Treasury and support our government to invest on infrastructure and get this economy going. But at this juncture, we are in a deep crisis.
So when you speak about the issues of infrastructure, for example, the finance minister is saying, and this is not a new issue, that they're reviewing the infrastructure conditional grant. And this is also where the big part of the problem is, because billions of rands are being surrendered back to Treasury by these provinces, and they could also be spending this money towards service delivery.
Unfortunately, when you in these provinces, when some of the bureaucrats are under pressure from politicians to allocate tenders to politically linked people, you're going to get misallocation of resources. So what happens is that many bureaucrats are very worried to act, and therefore they don't do what they're supposed to do. So money sits there, and a budget cycle comes, and therefore that money has to go back. So the issue around reforms of the state and the capacity and competence of the state is very important. So politicians need to allow bureaucrats to do what they do best and hold them to account if they're not spending money wisely. Where there is a much bigger control for politicians to tell bureaucrats what they need to do, then you're going to have that money being returned, because for many professionals, the risk is just too high for you to do what you're being told by politicians when it's going to those that are politically favored. So until we deal decisively with the corruption that we saw under state capture, we allow bureaucrats to do what they're supposed to do, and there's consequence management, our economy is not going to go forward. And that's the area where the president and through Operation Lumkile, we're trying to bring back private sector partners to help us, because politically, when the departments are driving with political heads, there's a lot of inefficiencies. We've seen, in fact, in the recent case in relation to CETA, we've seen also how politicians make decisions and appoint board members without due processes because they are politically linked. As long as we have that, we're not going to get and resolve our problems. So we need to allow due processes and let bureaucrats do what they need to do.
Right on that point, because when the minister was in his opening remarks this afternoon, he says that this was a balance between the technical part and politics, because we have seen what has been happening over time. And then he also speaks about the process that cabinet is now going to have to undertake in order to approve the budget guidelines. Where do they begin?
Well, I mean, the task, what the minister was talking about in terms of introducing the new system is to try and allow the efficiencies to be brought in. So we're hoping that through those processes, we'll be able to get efficiencies. I think the biggest issue, the biggest problem relates to the political appointment. So the challenge is whether the president can put in his cabinet people that are familiar with the areas that they lead, so that the politicians don't undermine the bureaucrats. Where people that are not familiar with the area where they are deployed, that is where the mismanagement and problems happened. So I'm hoping that as you introduce these efficiencies, 2 tasks that the minister announced, that the politicians also will be competent in the areas where they're allocated and allow the bureaucrats to do what they're supposed to do, so that the South African taxpayer can get a return on the buck that they're being taxed on, and we see progress in the implementation of the government budget by different departments.
And especially because the minister speaks about the fact that he wants the debt to stabilize over time, and government spending needs to at least now be monitored very closely. But thank you so much, Dr. Mondi, for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks for chatting to us.
Pleasure.
That was Wits University political economist, Dr. Lumkile Mondi.